Okay, this video is going to take us through a close look at the first program that we wrote, which is the Hello Printer program. And it's going to be a page that is a revision here of what we originally handed out as far as page 3 goes of our chapter 1 notes. And so it's going to provide more fill-in-the-blank stuff than writing everything out. So as we look at this, you may have to go, you may have to pause the video every once in a while to catch up with some note taking. So, but please be willing to do that. Here we go. So we look at this program that we've already typed out, and you should have the Hello Printer document open in JGrasp as well, so that you can go to that when needed. So at first, though, we're just going to take a look at the notes here on page 3, the revised version. And so what we're going to do is we're going to label some of the code here first. So we're going to, number 1 here, we're going to identify these different terms. And so the first line of code is called the class header. Alright, so all of our classes are going to have this line. It's going to start with public and class, and then the third word is going to be the class name. Alright, so the class name, of course, here is then Hello Printer. So the name is always at the end. And we've already discussed that anyway. So then the next line has a curly brace, and so what this is an opening curly brace for the class. So the class, this is a header for the class. So now where does the class start? Well, it starts on line 2. This is the boundary for the class, and it's also going to have a place where it stops, and so you're going to have a closing brace for the class, and that's going to be down here in line 7. And you'll notice if you're writing this, now the compiler will not, it won't matter to the compiler, but what you as a program want to do is have it be systematic, and so you're going to have a this along the same indentation. So the P in public, the opening brace, and the closing brace will be on that first line of indentation, or actually the left margin. All right, the next thing then is line 3. Line 3, which we might have already talked about, is a main method header. Alright, and we're going to talk about methods here in just a second. Now, in front of the parentheses is going to be the method name. And so that would be right here. So this name of this method is main, and the main method is going to have a place to start and stop. So that is defined by the curly brace that comes right after the header. So it's the opening brace. Now I'm leaving out the word curly so it's less for you to write. So it's the opening brace for the main method is right here. And of course it's going to have a place that it's got to stop. And so you're going to have what we call the closing brace. Alright, and we're going to talk about blocks of code here in just a second. And then the next line is line 5, which we identify as a print statement. The print statement is, at this point, the only way we know how to display output on the screen. There's another method that we will learn later on, but right now, print statement is what displays output on the screen. Now, inside of this the parentheses of this method will go like this. This is an argument. Oh, I didn't want to do that. That was silly. Alright, so okay, so this is an argument in between the parentheses. And we'll talk about that just a little bit more, but we want to label it for right now. And then inside the, let's see, inside the quotation marks is something else, and that is a string. So whenever you see quotation marks, you should be thinking, okay, I have a string here. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Alright, so that's the main things that are being labeled. And so as we start to look at the terms down here, we've labeled, I believe, everything in that it says to in line 1. Now, the class template, line 2. The class template is these 6 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7. And so you have the class header, you have its opening brace for the class, you have the main method header, you have its opening brace, and then you have the closing brace for the main method, and then the closing brace for the class. Those 6 lines are going to be in every class that we write. Every class that we write must have those 6 lines on it, and then it's going to change. What's going to change is what goes in between the inside here, and later on what happens even outside of that. Alright, so you should be able to sit down and write, type the code, type the 6 lines of the class template without looking. That would be a great thing to be able to do. That will help you greatly. Alright, so now block of code. Block of code is very important to the compiler. A block of code is defined by opening and closing curly braces. Okay, it's defined by opening and closing curly braces. And so the body of the class and the body of the main method are blocks of code. The body of the class and the body of the main method are blocks of code. Now, as we go on in this class, we're going to find different types of blocks of code, different uses for blocks of code. For example, the body of a loop. That'll be something we'll use, and other things. So, now, how important is this? Well, if we look at, let's do this. Let's go to our Hello printer. Now let's just see how important this block of code is. Let's take away the last curly brace and then compile it. So what you're going to see is that you have an error message. And so what it says is it reached the end of the file while parsing. And so what that means is this, is that the compiler needs to, now parse means to put a partition, set up partitions to basically to take something and break it up into parts, different sections. And so what happens is the first section is what makes up the class. It has a class header, so the compiler goes, okay, we have a class, I need to know where it starts. Here it is. And then it has a main method, and it says I need to know where it starts. Okay. And then it has, okay, where does it end? Where does the main method end? Well, it ends right here. Okay, now it's reached the end of the file. Okay, right there. While parsing, while putting this code into different sections or to different parts. But what it doesn't know at this point is that it doesn't know where the end of the class is. And so therefore it says I've reached the end of the file while putting things into parts, which means I'm not done. I'm still wanting, I still need to finish one of the parts, but there's nothing that tells me where it stops. And so the compiler gets mad and it tells you, gives you this message. And so this is an important thing. It's got to be able to break up the code into parts. And so let's And so what you want to do is go ahead and put the oh, I realized what I just did here. Let's put the curly brace back and then compile it, make sure it's running fine. So put curly brace back in. And so now the same thing would happen if you delete the brace that you have for the main method, the closing brace. So either way, it's missing a closing brace. And so in our notes, what we want to do is we want to add a line here, and I've got it written down here. So you're gonna probably everyone's gonna get this message at least once, but definitely people are gonna get this. So if you get an error message that says reach the end of file while parsing, what that means, what that tells you, is that you are missing a closing brace, not an opening brace, but a closing brace. So that gives you a clue on as far as where to look. So make sure you have that written down on your paper. Okay, so let's see here. Okay. Oh, I didn't want to do that. I wanted this to let me undo that. Nope, it doesn't. Okay, so anyways, so we move on. A method. Well, what is a method? So in number 4, a method is recognized by parentheses. So you really could just write an opening and closing parentheses in this blank, and the method name before the parentheses. So if you notice up here, this is a main method. We know it's a method because we see these parentheses, and then we see a name before it. So it's a method whose name is main. Now, where else do we see parentheses? And that would be right here. So we see parentheses here, and then the name before it is Println. So that is the Println method. So that's how we recognize a method. And so methods perform a certain function, like the Println method. Okay, so it performs a certain function. The function of this method is, what the task that it does is it displays output on the screen. So if you notice, when we run the program, it displays hello world. So the idea is, whenever you have a print statement, it's going to print or display something on the screen. Now, then you have another type of method that is a it performs a series of tasks. So in here you can write a series of tasks like the main method. And so what happens is, this main method, if you look in the body, we can write in here that the method body contains the series of tasks. So I think we talked about this already. This is the body of the main method, and so right now it only has one statement. Now, as we go along, we're going to add more and more statements. In fact, later in class, or later in this video, we're going to add a couple of, or maybe in the next video, we're going to add some print statements. So it'll have a series of tasks. Alright, so these are the things that the main method does. A method is something where the compiler does something. It performs certain tasks. Alright, the next thing that we want to look at is an argument. It's an argument, number 5, is within the parentheses of a method. It's within the parentheses of a method, and that's why we said that this was an argument. This looks like it's kind of got messed up. Anyways, so it's okay. I think we did that right. Yeah. So inside these parentheses, we have an argument. So from the quotation mark to the quotation mark. Okay. Then multiple arguments are separated by commas in number 5. Multiple arguments are separated by commas. Now at this point I think that we're not going to see multiple arguments until we get to chapter 5. So for now, the arguments of these methods is always going to just have one item in there. One argument instead of 2. Alright, then the next thing is a string. So a string that we've already identified here is a group, in number 6, is a group of characters within a set of quotation marks. So it's a group of characters within a set of quotation marks. Well, so what happens is, just like when we see parentheses, we should be thinking, okay, method. When you see quotation marks, you should be thinking string. And so you will see a string of characters, or a group, or a sequence of characters. And so the characters in number 6 are the following. And I'll just kind of type them up here, I think, so you can see somewhere down here. So characters would be things like letters, numbers, spaces, and punctuation marks, and symbols. So those are characters. Those are things that can be between the quotation marks. And so this would be very important to make sure that you've got this down. And so in here we then, if you were to count the number of characters in this particular string, you should get 13. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the space is 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then 13 for the exclamation point. So you have 13 characters within that string. Alright, now we're going to apply this the argument in the string now to the print statement. And so number 7, the print statement displays output on the screen. A print statement displays output on a screen. And so print means to display output on the screen. Okay, so that's what it means to print. It doesn't mean, in Java's case, it doesn't mean to print a hard copy of something. It means to display something specifically on the screen. And so what this program does is it displays hello, comma, space, world, exclamation point. Alright, so the Println method. Okay, the Println method number 8, it's going to perform a specific function. Now there are 2 parts to it, and so you will notice that Println is made up of 2 parts. It's print and then ln, 2 parts. So that gives you a clue as to what the 2 things the compiler does with a Println method. So in number 8, print tells the compiler to print what the argument says to print. It means to print what the argument says to print. If we look into the argument, we find that in the argument is a string. And in this string, it's got 13 characters. So that means it needs to print all 13 characters. So if you want a space between the comma and the W, you have to actually type that in between the parentheses and in between the quotation marks. Otherwise, it won't display that space. So it displays that space because it's inside the quotation marks. Then the second thing is what does the ln tell the compiler to do? It tells the compiler to move the insertion point to the next line. So that means then now there's a mnemonic that you can use to help remember what Println does, what the compiler does with it. And that mnemonic there in number 8 is print and go. Print and go. So write that in there, and then open up your Hello printer and let's see, I gotta take a time out here. Okay, you take the Hello printer file and let's copy this print statement below itself, and in the string, in the second argument, let's go ahead and type how are you, comma, or I mean question mark, and then compile it and run it. And so what you're going to see is it so it prints, oh, where'd it go? Okay, I've lost my little thing there. That's really weird. Unfortunately, let me see if this will let me. Oh man. Well, that's weird. Oh, there we are. I wonder what happened there. Well, there we go. Okay, I don't know what happened. Anyways, so here's what happens. You've got two parts. You have print, and you have ln. And so the first thing is to print what the argument says to print. So it prints hello, comma, world, exclamation point. The ln says now go to the next line, move the insertion point to the next line, and so then it goes down to here, goes to the next line, and it blinks and just waits for the next output. So then along comes the next print statement, and so it says now it has two parts, print and ln, and so it prints how are you, and so whoops, okay, so it prints how are you, and then it moves to the next line because of the ln, so it sits down here, and that's why we have a blank line in here, because of that ln. Alright, so that's how the print ln works, is it goes print and go, print and go. Alright, now what we need to do is let's take this first print statement and delete the ln and then compile it and run it. Okay, so now if you look at back at your notes down here, for the print method, it says to print what the argument says to print, and then because there's no ln, the insertion point stays on the line. So because there's no ln, the insertion point stays on the line. And so as we look at this then, let's take a look. And so we have, it says to print hello world, so we do that, and so the compiler does that. It says print hello world. But because there is no ln, then the insertion point stays, and it's waiting for the next output. Well, along comes the next line of code, and it says now print how are you. Well, it happens to be the insertion point's on the same line, so it's just going to pick up from where it left off. And then in this case there is an ln, and so now it's going to go to the next line down, and that's why we have, of course, that space in here. Alright, that's how this works. And so on your notes then, what you need to do is the mnemonic, say print and stay. So the print ln, print and go, print is print and stay. So let's take, there's a couple things more that we need to do, and so let's make it so let's add another print statement. Let's copy and paste the how are you, and then let's change the how are you to hope you're good. Whoops. Alright, now what we want to do is we have 3 different print statements, which is potentially 3 different lines. Okay, up here we had 2 print statements, 2 lines of output. Let's make it so these 3 print statements produce only 1 line of output. So I encourage you to try this yourself to see if you can make it to work, and then so pause the video, try it yourself, and then restart the video or resume the video and see how you did. So what we need to do is we would need to make this second one a print method, and then if we run it, compile it and run it, it puts it all on one line, but you see that you need some spaces down here. So what you got to do is you have to go up and put maybe a space here, or you could put a space here, one or the other, not both. And now you need a space after the question mark or before the capital H. I'll go ahead and put it before the capital H. Now you compile it and run it. And so now you have 3 print statements that print everything on one line, and there's a space between each one because you put a space inside the quotation marks. So that's how you would do that. Alright, we're going to look at one more thing, and that is let's delete the last line, and then let's delete this space in hello world, and let's copy that, one of those print statements, and paste it. And so now you have 3 print statements, only the second one, let's delete everything in it, so it's an empty parentheses. And then have the ln be on all of these, and we'll show you what happens. So if we then compile this and then run it, then what you'll see is that it prints hello world right here, and then the ln says go to the next line, which is right here, and then the next print statement says print nothing. Alright, so it doesn't print anything, and then the ln says go to the next line down, so it goes down here, the insertion point does, and then it prints how are you right here, and then the ln says go to the next line down, and which is why you have the blank line here. And so you can see a system.out.println with a blank argument, with no argument, is going to cause there to be a blank line in the output. Alright, this is one way to do it. We'll learn another way later on, but for right now this is the way we're going to do it. And so that should be it for this particular video.